Today on the podcast, we are actually on location at New Holland. We're talking with Adam Dickerson. He's brand manager for all things that happen here, but specifically today, we're talking bourbon. Adam, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you so much for taking a couple minutes. I'm excited to talk about this. Obviously, I reached out to you because I wanted to talk about the weeded whiskey, and then you guys won a huge award. So I actually want to start there with Origin being best in class from the American Distillers Institute. Like, how huge is that? I read the Forbes article, right? But like, from your perspective, how big is that for you guys?
It was huge. We, as members of the American Distilling Institute, they helped us get started as a distillery, and for them to award us and acknowledge that we potentially have the best whiskey in the world, according to them, it doesn't get any better than that. I mean, it's like, I think it hit us, it came across our emails, and we were just, throwing papers up in the air. It was awesome. It was a really, really wonderful award to win, and we are quite honored to be able to have that. The word's gotten out that it's just remarkable, unique bourbon in a way that is different from a ton of different, most of the bourbon out there. I think there's a ton of bourbon on the shelf, and people ask, well, why does the world need another one? We think ours brings value and brings a whole different experience than the rest, both visually in the bottle and then also when you drink it. But I think, it's that award certainly has kicked up the demand quite a bit, but it was already in that space. We have plans. We've been planning this product for over 6-7 years now, and so the plan is for growth every year. We don't want this to remain a product that only very few people can get. We've done, if you think of how we've grown on the beer side, most breweries in the country treated their bourbon barrel-aged stouts like a highly allocated, gotta line up and get it product. And that's fun, and we still want to have products like that, because as someone who does that myself, I love to go line up with a bunch of friends and get products that maybe not everyone can get. But we want to be able to offer these products to as many people as want them. So Dragon's Milk started as a barrel-aged stout and was something that people lined up here for, and it started with one barrel, and we invested in the both technology and equipment and space to age that, and now have the biggest barrel-aged beer program in the country. We want to be able to do something very similar with bourbon. We see bourbon as that next step for someone who's probably drinking craft beer for 10-15 years. We know that people are migrating over to the whiskey drinking world, and while this is small now and it will take longer to grow because it takes time and patience to age whiskey, we have plans in place for the bourbon this product to become more available both in Michigan and also around the country in years to come.
Which is kind of where I want to get to, Adam, is I want to talk about the origin, no pun intended. I want to talk about the origins of this, because you guys started this project, when we talk about the bourbon sector, it really takes off during COVID. Like, it has outsized growth in COVID and obviously keeps going. But you didn't start this in COVID. This was well before. And so I'm wondering, without giving away the secret sauce of the whole thing, but the story behind how this whole thing starts is fascinating to me. And even the way it's created with the Prohibition era pot still and all that stuff. When did you guys start talking about moving into this, and how did we get to where we are today, where you've got, right in front of us, we have 4 of your products, but there's, around 7 in the whiskey universe.
Absolutely.
But like, how did it start, and how did we get here?
Yeah, I think it all started when people at our pub on 8th in Holland were asking for cocktails, and we couldn't give them to them. And our founder, CEO, Brett Vanderkamp, does not wants to provide people with a moment that they can savor no matter what they like to drink. He wants people to be able to enjoy the experience in our buildings. And so, we just said, well, let's build a still. And so he grabbed an old, I think it was a soup kettle out of the kitchen, went to the American Distilling Institute. The president, Bill Owens, worked together to make that and turn it into a still. And they started distilling brandy because it was the only thing legal.
Hang on. You took a soup pot?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was a soup kettle that they fabricated into a still. Okay. So it was pretty backwoods style for a while there. But experimented on that, and slowly grew it and grew it and grew it and grew it. And we started laying down whiskey before we were legally allowed to sell it.
Sure.
Because in the state there were laws dating back to Prohibition protecting our fruit farmers, saying you could only sell distilled products that was from fruit. And so Brett had to work in legislatively to get some things passed. And then when you could legally sell whiskey in the state of Michigan that you distilled here, we had some 3-year-old whiskey available. So it became a lot of the things here is, we have an interest in them. We like these things. So let's try to make them. And it started that long ago, investing in that. And it's partially wanting to provide as many people products that they enjoy, but it's also, we would, if we didn't believe in them, we didn't want to do them, we didn't think they were quality and products, we wouldn't be making them. So I think it's just a combination of a lot of different things, but it's definitely a lot of credit to Brett being, having the foresight to diversify and make new things and not always be wanting to be stuck in one product. I think our mission here is to provide savored moments to the world. And, in this building, we do it here in Grand Rapids. And, that doesn't always have to be centered on a product. It's what the product delivers that mission of and that experience. And for us, for a lot of people now, it's whiskey. And, as a lot of the people in this company, we like whiskey and bourbon too. And so we weren't going to just settle on craft beers, the start and the finish line. It's, part of the journey. Yeah.
So one of the things that I think makes this space, we are in Grand Rapids right now, if you're not watching the video, it makes this space, actually both spaces, unique is how does that product shift change the type of person that you hire, right? Because you're also in rarefied air that you are experts at making beer.
Sure.
And obviously experts at making spirits. And then when you sit here at the bar that we're sitting at, the people that you talk to also right? They didn't make these products, but they understand both of them at a really, really deep level.
Yeah.
How do you go about making a staff that can adapt to those sorts of changes and then respond to the consumer interest?
Sure. Everything we do when we're hiring here is based on our values as a company. So we have our mission, but we also have a series of values that we hire by, train by, and use our goals and kind of growth principles to get there. So we know that a lot of those things can be trained if we hire the right people that have the same values as us and have the same ambitions as what our company mission is. So certainly some people come in here and they're trained already in whiskey or beer or making cocktails, or they're distillers or they're brewers, but most don't, and we have to train them, and it takes a lot of work. In the retail space specifically, we have an incredible staff of people who when you're walking around here before every shift, they're training on what the new products are, they're training on the processes around them. We have a really great training process and a people and culture team here that invest in our people and really care to make sure that they are learning and growing and becoming experts. But it takes time. I mean, it takes months and months and months for someone to get onboarded and then feel comfortable talking about them. But so many people here at New Holland were trained and learned on the job. It's not always been something that we're poaching the top from everywhere else. It's about the right people with the right values who can fit into our culture, and then you can learn about these things. It's not rocket science at the end of the day. I just watched Oppenheimer. It's not quantum physics.
Did you get to see it in IMAX?
I did. Yeah, second row. It was quite the experience.
It's something. It's funny. I walked out of that and I went, we can make films like this?
Yeah.
This is a thing that we can make?
It was wonderful. It was very good.
All right, let's get back to the bourbon, right? So Origin is the one that's the celebrated. Let's talk about that one first, because it has an interesting build.
Yeah.
And I know we don't tell the exact build, but can you talk about the barley into it and kind of how it gives it a different flavor than what you might experience in, let's say, Maker's Mark or something along those lines?
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's a couple things that make all of our whiskeys unique, and that's our pot still. So Irish whiskey is traditionally distilled on a pot still. Most American bourbon is distilled on a column still. What that means is you actually have to fill, if you can imagine, like a pot of water. You have to fill that with the grain or the distilled wash that has been fermented. So it's almost like a beer. It's a fermented beverage that's been made from, in this case, corn, rye, and barley. And you have to fill that tank full of it, that pot, distill it, and then empty it. Every batch is unique. So like every batch has to be filled and emptied. Column stills are consistent or continuous, so you're constantly running that through. So one interesting thing is from every bottle of origin to the next, there can be differences, and that journey and that experience is fun to us. There's also just a body that's different in pot distilled bourbon. It's going to be a little bit more full bodied, and it's going to have some different flavors. We get a lot of fruit flavor from our still. And also what you're mentioning, the barley. So the second part is, what is the wash made of that goes into that still? What is that beer made of, for lack of a better term? We use a higher than average, significantly higher than average ratio of barley in our wash. Most bourbon is like very high corn, a tiny bit of rye, a tiny bit of barley. We're using quite a bit of barley, and that is partially inspired, and the reason there is because of our brewing roots.
I was going to say, yeah, because
we have quality malted barley already in our building, the highest quality barley you can get. Let's use that. We know how to work with it. We know how to use it. Let's use that in our products to provide a different experience, a different flavor for the consumer, one that we really like. So, to put it very simply, if you were to taste our origin bourbon, it's almost the flavor profiles kind of dance the line between Irish whiskey and bourbon. You get a ton of like stone fruit, which to us is like apricot, pear, plum. You get a lot of those nice fruit qualities. You get this like pastry in there that's like, it feels like you're walking to Nantucket Bakery here in Grand Rapids. We get a lot of vanilla wafer, and then you get this toasted oak in there as well. But those lighter kind of citrusy fruit qualities are both coming from that barley and the pot still, and the flavors that happen in there. There's a lot of our pot still produces this nice body in our bourbon, but there's this really long period of reflux where it's distilling over and over again, evaporating and condensing, that produces these delicate fruit flavors, and that's what people are, I think, really latching onto. It's we don't want to create a bourbon so different that it's like doesn't taste like bourbon, but we want to provide something that has a reason to be on that shelf and a reason for you to have it in your bar at home, that it's providing a different experience, a different flavor than frankly, like so many of the bourbons out there are pretty much, they're close to being clones of each other. It's just a different bottle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you've done Origin, obviously, and you did a toasted version. Mm-hmm. Will you mess with Origin more than that, or is that kind of the two that you're going to...
No, we have plans for this to become kind of a product with many extensions, and we have the
extensions
luxury.
Is better than mess with, yeah.
It's good. I mean, behind the scenes, it's mostly messing with. It's tinkering and experimenting till we find the right thing. But we have, we've done our toasted releases. There will be another one coming later this year. We also are just about to release one that is a honey barrel origin. So we sourced 2 barrels worth of honey from a Michigan bee farmer, filled our bourbon barrels full of that honey for several months, emptied those, and then put the bourbon back in it for a few more months. And it just pulled all that rich honey. I actually tasted it yesterday. It's coming out on the 26th of August. That one will be incredible. And then we also have a bonded version that'll be being distributed later in the year. So that will be higher proof higher proof at 100 proof. All bonded whiskey has to be 100 proof.
I was just going to, so for people who are new to this, explain it. Yeah.
So bottled in bond is a government designation of quality that stems back quite a long ways. But you'll see a lot of different bourbons that have like a bottled in bond designation. That means it has to be distilled in one season. So like all of the distillate has to be maybe distilled in spring of 2017. It has to be aged under the supervision in a government bonded warehouse, and then you have to proof it to 100 proof, and it has to be at least 4 years old. So that will be coming out this fall as a different extension on the brand that we're really excited about, and that'll be a little bit more readily available than this toasteds and the honey barrel. So yeah, there'll be plans. This is the flagship one that'll be the one that's always going to be most available, but we innovate all the time here, and we want to make sure we're providing new and exciting things that maybe we haven't done before.
And speaking of new and exciting, you also dropped a 10-year whiskey.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, for someone who's new in the space, And even somebody who isn't new in the space, you've named it. You've given it a lexicon that's interesting to me, and you've called it a wheated whiskey.
Yep.
And so I'm wondering for people, could you explain the difference between, because typically bourbon ends up landing in that world, how close does that walk up to bourbon, and what's the difference?
Yep.
And where did the 10-year come from?
Sure. Yeah, so the difference between wheat whiskey and bourbon is the ratio of grain. So a wheat whiskey, if there is more than 51% wheat in that wash, in that mash bill, it is a wheat whiskey, according to the designation. If it is more than 51% barley, it becomes a malt whiskey. If it's more than 51% corn, it's a bourbon.
Got it.
So just like, I've mentioned a minute ago, it's probably both a blessing and a curse that we like to innovate so much. Sometimes not everything turns out, but the things we put on the shelf we like.
Yeah.
So in this case, 10 or actually 11 years ago now, we distilled quite a bit of wheat whiskey. We also have a good amount of wheat here in the state of Michigan, and it was a fun experiment that we've done, and we have more to come in very small quantities of wheat. Quite recently, over the last year, we've worked with the Southwest Michigan Bourbon Hunters, a group of friends of ours, and that we've worked closely with to kind of help. They buy barrels of whiskey, and they, through a retailer down near Kalamazoo, Hoffman's Party Store, and they've been loving our wheat whiskey, and I think part of that has built this hype around it. And so, we've always had, like we always have on our stores here in our retail stores, a couple different expressions or bottle releases of different things other than bourbon. So this one's currently available now. It's 11 years old, single barrel wheat whiskey. So it's going to have a little bit more kind of like earthy, soft, like biscuit, like bready notes rather than as much fruit. But it is still rich, and it does have some nice cherry in there as well. But yeah, we've got quite a bit of like nice aged whiskey. You can always find our single malt Zeppelin Bend here at our stores as well. That's usually has a 10-year expression. We've got a rum finished and a sherry finish that are both 10 years old at the moment. And I'm not going to say what it is specifically, but later in the year there will be a 10-year-old bourbon that we'll be releasing in November. So nice. Keep an eye out on social media for that one.
We will absolutely, and I'll let you go through all those in just a second. But the last question I want to make sure that we get to, because when I was able to tour right before you did the launch of Origin, and we got to see the pot still, there's a story. It's the 7th license out of Prohibition, right? Is that?
Yeah.
So talk about that real quick, and then I'll let you go for the day.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. The still we have was the 7th still commissioned after Prohibition in the state of New Jersey. We found it kind of in. It was found in a barn, through lack of a better term, like the Craigslist for distilleries. And Brett, our CEO, found it with some help from some other people, and we sent it down to Louisville to get refabricated, cleaned up, polished up, and there it sits. So yeah, it was made originally to distill Applejack, which is apple brandy. So you take out fermented alcoholic apple cider and you distill that. And it was, right after Prohibition, it was distilling Applejack out in New Jersey, and we've tried to track down more information, but we have struggled to find all the details. A lot of distilling seems to happen behind the scenes. But yeah, now it's making wonderful bourbon, and we couldn't be happier with the product it produces.
Well, congratulations to all the stuff that you're doing. For people who maybe they have not heard of you, I don't know who those people would be, but if they haven't, where's the best place to find out about these products and the craft beer and all that stuff?
If you live in Holland or Grand Rapids or Battle Creek, Saugatuck or South Haven, we have a location near you, so come on in. We'd love to have you. Food, drink, beer, spirits, kombucha, cocktails. We have wine here as well. But otherwise, if you're not local, go online to our websites or social media. All of our bourbon is now found under the Dragon's Milk brand family. So we've made the decision, as Dragon's Milk on the beer side has really grown and evolved into its own brand. All of our bourbon lives under that brand family. So all of our other whiskeys live under New Holland. So newhollandbrew.com or dragonsmilk.com, where you can find all of our spirits products, beer products, all the information you might need.
I love it. My friend, have a great day.
Thank you very much.